welcome back to episode 95 of Talkoffamepod podcast with your host, Kyliemontigney. And I'm so excited to have on singer, dancer, and actor, Katherine Boston. Thanks so much. Come on, Katherine.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Me too. I'm so excited to talk with you. So, what made you want to pursue a career in the entertainment industry?
Ever since I was little, I always loved attention. I always loved performing in some capacity. My mother signed me up for dance classes when I was 2 years old. And so I've been performing in some way ever since then.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Like, when did, was the entertainment industry always kind of been something you always wanted to do? Or is it kind of something that, like, you're like, oh my God, this is actually a thing. I should pursue this. This is for me. That's kind of how I felt. I'm like, oh my God, this is something I can't do. I never thought I'd be in the entertainment industry ever in my life.
Yeah. So when I was uh 8 years old, I believe, 7 or 8 years old, I was at the dance studio and there was a flyer for an equity production of Annie. And I was young at the time. And my mother was like, oh, this will be fun. Like, and I was like, yeah, I want to do that. So I did like the pre-screens at my home dance studio, and then I was invited to the live audition, and then from there I booked it. And so that was my first ever show and my first professional gig. And I've been lucky enough to continue doing it. And yeah, now I go to school for it, which is so crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't believe it because you said you went to NYU. Like, when did you start NYU this year? Or
No, so I am a junior. So
oh, you
I've been here for
are.
3 years. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, like have you been to NYU the last 3 years or you switched like colleges in between?
No. So I graduated high school 2020, so COVID year. And
Oh
so
yeah.
college admissions were a bit crazy at that time because we didn't know what was going to happen,
Hmm.
if we were still going to, if in person was even going to be possible.
Hmm.
So I started it, long story short, I started in fall of 2020.
Oh
But
really? Like did you go in person because of COVID or you just did online at first?
I was on campus, but none of my classes my first year were in person, which was so strange because especially for like a drama major,
Hmm.
um all of our classes to be remote, it
Hmm.
was so bizarre because we'd be making like weird noises and like dancing in front of our Zoom cameras,
Hmm.
which is so strange.
Hmm. Yeah, like that time was so weird. Like I was like, remember being like, can this be over? Like, I want to live a normal life. I want to go back to school. Like, how
Yeah,
did you
and it
get through
was
that time? Because obviously, for actors or whatever, it's hard for that time, like, especially for people in entertainment. Like, how did you get through that time not going on set or doing what you kind of did for?
I mean, thankfully, at that time, and I mean, still now, I guess, acting wasn't my primary source of income. I was a
Hmm.
student. So I really have a lot of empathy for those who, that was like their big thing. They went from like being on Broadway to like having like not knowing if their position or role was going to be secured when it, if or and if it came back. So, but I don't know. It was very strange because it was nice that I was in school and like the scenes and stuff that I was doing in classes were artistically stimulating, but it's never the same as being on a set or being, like on stage. And
Hmm.
so I don't know, you just kind of during that time I found myself like journaling a lot, like remembering like why I'm doing what I'm doing
Hmm.
and how to make it new and exciting on this new platform because it's still a big part of the industry now. Like it's
Hmm.
crazy how COVID has like transformed the entertainment industry.
You really has. Like, if it wasn't for quarantine, like, people really, like, wouldn't do the same thing as they do. Like, obviously, self-tapes would probably wouldn't be a really a thing without COVID. Because
Mhm.
obviously, they still do self-tapes now because obviously COVID is still kind of here and people are always worried. Like, was always self-tapes a thing for you or like you when you just always go in person for auditions?
Um, I I did do a good amount of self tapes before, but I definitely feel like I do a lot more now. Even
Mm-hmm.
now, like for callbacks, most of them are like on Zoom, unless you're like, like the final three, four, five people
Mm-hmm.
for like a role, or if you have to go in and do a chemistry read with someone.
Yeah.
But yes, things are still like so Zoom based. And so it's so strange working because working to prepare like a piece for like an in-person audition is
Mhm.
completely different than preparing it for like a Zoom audition because it's
Yeah.
the camera's so much more intimate, even if it is a theatrical setting.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And so, like I said, mentioned before, like you currently studying drama at NYU.
mhm.
Like, what do you kind of hope to achieve while attending NYU, and like how do you like the city in general? Because obviously, before we started, we were talking about NYU, New York City. Like, how do you kind of enjoy studying drama there and stuff?
Yeah, no, I love it. So NYU is um a different kind of conservatory program because
Mm-hmm.
it's considered a 40-60. So 40% is academics and 60% is conservatory, which is like the acting training. So like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then depending on like right now we're in rehearsals for production. So we have more rehearsals on the weekends, but Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we have class from 9 to 5. And so it's like having a full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I love the city. It's such a change in pace for me. I'm from a small town in central Maine, so it's it's definitely different than home or anything I would experience at home. But I definitely think it was like not only a necessary move for my career,
Mm-hmm.
but also just like on a more personal level, like to kind of force myself to get out of my comfort zone. You grow
Mm-hmm.
up with the same people and the same community for a really long time, which is great
Mm-hmm.
because then you get to know everyone, but I don't know, I'm a risk taker in a sense, and
Mm-hmm.
I like to be able to meet lots of people and experience new things. So,
Yeah, that's how I am. Like obviously Maine and Pennsylvania are like similar because obviously for Pennsylvania, like in Maine, they're not really industry type of states. It's mostly like New York City and Los Angeles. And so like
yeah.
for Pennsylvania, it's mostly country land.
Hmm.
While everything's all country and there's no industry thing at all in Pennsylvania. And
Yeah.
so, like, the closest thing for me and you was New York City. Like, obviously, like New York City is 2 hours away from me, and it's obviously kind of like a long drive for you since you're from Central Maine. Like, how
Mhm.
has like kind of being from Maine kind of helped you, like, or kind of impacted you with being in entertainment? Because obviously, from not being big cities like New York City and Los Angeles, it can be very difficult to make more connections and stuff. Because
Yeah.
obviously, for me personally, it's very difficult to actually make connections, to actually do all these interviews in person. Because obviously, when people reach out to me and do magazines and stuff in person, I'm like, I can't do that. Like, I don't even live in the city. But how has it kind of impacted you physically as an actor?
Um, I think for the most part, I was very lucky to start making those connections when I was very young. Um, because the theater that I worked for, Maine State Music Theater, has a lot of great connections in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
But the same kind of thing. It was like a summer stock theater, a
Mm-hmm.
regional theater. So it only happens during the summer. So I
Yeah.
think from a very young age, I was not like trained by any means to think, but for me, I was like, oh, theater is a treat.
Yeah.
Live theater is like very much like a treasure. It only really happens during the summer, like once a
Mm-hmm.
year, really. And I mean, there were other productions and stuff going on, of course, but not to that like level, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and still, there are only three equity houses in Maine. So, and they're all like pretty far away from one another.
Yeah.
So, that was kind of limited. But I mean, you see a lot of great people from small towns all over that are able to, branch out and make connections. Like, Patrick Dempsey's from Maine.
Oh, I
Anna
love Patrick
Kendrick.
Dempsey. He's
Yes,
easily my favorite person
Kendrick
ever.
is from Maine. She's from Portland, Maine. I actually grew up, we had the same voice teacher. Um, but yeah, no, so there are people that you can find, and those are big names, obviously. I'm sure there are
Mhm.
more. Like my friend Maddie, she has a podcast called Cinema Chicks where she like reviews film and stuff, and she really got into that um at home over quarantine. And she's from Maine too, the same town as me. We live 10 minutes away from each other, and now she's studying acting as well at Marymount.
Mhm.
And so it's really cool to see like there are people out there. It's just maybe hard to find because they feel like they're alone too.
Yeah, it really is hard to find, especially coming from a small town and stuff
Yeah.
and everything. Like you filmed a TV pilot over like this summer of 2022, is that right?
Yes, I
Like, can
did.
you tell us like kind of more about that and like your role as a character and stuff?
Yeah. So, um, the series is called Temporary Home. It was written by and directed, well, for the pilot episode anyway, that's all we did. It was written and directed by Linda Furlow. She started as a journalist at NBC,
Mhm.
and she produced an off-Broadway version of the script in the 90s, and it wasn't quite the right format for the story. I remember talking to her, and she mentioned that she always knew that she wanted it was more meant for film.
Mhm.
Um, so it started as an idea, and she started writing the script pre-COVID, and
Mhm.
then it became like a post-COVID project. Um, but yeah, no, we filmed in Queens for well, I was there for a couple of days. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, is it released yet or is it still like waiting?
No. So as far as I know, because there are so many people involved from literally all over, um, it's still in post-production. And then I believe during pilot season,
Mhm.
it will be pitched to various networks. So it's like interesting because there are different like ways that TV pilots can go. There's that way where it's like an independent director who's not like signed or like with a certain company will go and like pitch
Mhm.
it to a bunch of different places and see what happens. Or there are also just like someone brings in the script to a specific streaming service is mostly what they're used for nowadays, but
Mhm.
brings it into a specific streaming service, and then they will present a contract of some sort and
Mhm.
be like, oh, we really love this. But then if you do that, uh, they get a larger part in picking who gets to be in it, who gets to do what. And it was really important to Linda when she was doing this that she had people that she thought authentically really understood the characters and were the same
Mhm.
age as the characters. I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of times on especially like big TV shows, the teenage characters are always played by like 30-year-olds. And a lot of times
Mhm.
because of that and like the content that you're able to get away with someone who like looks a little bit older tends to make the teenage experience a bit hypersexualized.
Yeah.
So it was really important to her that she had people who were 1 or 2 years around the age of the actual character. And also
Mhm.
just that, and I mean, we'll see, I guess this may work for or against us, but really no big names either.
Mhm.
She wanted the people to be seen as the characters and not recognizable as like, oh, this is so and so from so and so. She wanted to really keep that suspension of disbelief alive.
No, I'd love that. And it's like we're like when you are usually kind of auditioning for a role, like how do you get into like the mindset of the character? Because obviously everyone's different when auditioning. Like how do you like for you personally, like how do you get into like, the mindset when auditioning for because there's many ways, because there's many different characters when you're acting. So like how do you get into like the mindset of any character basically?
Yeah, I guess it really depends on the character. depending on like, I guess their state too, depending on the material that I'm given.
Mm-hmm.
But for the pilot that I did, it was quite interesting because my character, um, she suffers from a lot of mental abuse
Mm-hmm.
from herself and from, I think, previous, not relationships, but like familial relationships, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never disclosed, but you can kind of put the pieces together. And so
Mm-hmm.
she's not very talkative, she's very shy, she's very sweet. And she's just she's so upset. She's so upset a lot of the times because and she gets so overwhelmed that she has a really hard time speaking. And so she
Mm-hmm.
really likes routine and she really likes structure. And so I think that for me, even though there were a lot of scenes that I was in where I didn't have any lines to, kind of literally say what I was saying, it was important that she was just as active in the scene as any other person who had lines.
Mm-hmm.
So, because she's not someone who speaks much, I had to decide, is she the kind of person that is just completely zoned out, or is she the kind of person that really is an active listener and kind of just takes note of things that are being said around her? So
Mm-hmm.
I guess kind of and that's part of the cool thing about like working with new plays or like new material is that you get to work in collaboration with the director and everyone to kind of like figure out the character,
Mm-hmm.
which is super cool. And that was probably part of my most favorite part of it.
I love that. Like, what? Like, did you ever find a way? Like, is there any character, even in the TV pilot? Like, was there any character that you felt like connected to you the most, or you felt like, oh my God, this is like kind of harder than I thought, or it was kind of totally opposite than you as a person, basically?
Oh, yeah. Well, it takes place in a group home. So my character is one of the girls in the group home,
Mm-hmm.
and she is not like what I was saying earlier. She's not as verbal as a lot of the other girls.
Yeah.
And there are girls of all ages in this home. And so I feel like she feels a little bit distant and almost not jealous, but longing towards them because they're so
Mm-hmm.
easily able to socialize and make friends. And that's just not possible for her because
Mm-hmm.
one, because of her condition, and two, that would mean that she has to get out of her own way in her own head to do that, which
Mm-hmm.
she can't do. And at this point, anyways. And so the person that I felt my character connected most with on set was her caretaker named Bernie. She serves as like the nurse, and they have like a very special relationship. Um
Mm-hmm.
she's kind of the only person too that really listens to my character, even when, because a lot of times it looks like she's not saying anything, but she's kind of like mumbling to herself a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And people are just so easily dismiss her. She's like, oh, she's speaking gibberish, she doesn't know what she's saying. She's like, at one point she's like, oh no, like you like really have to pay attention to people and take note of what they're doing. And so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there are a couple of really sweet scenes which I don't know if they'll end up in it or not, but um yeah, those were
Yeah, so like what is something like I know you're just starting out and everything, but like what is something you wish you kind of knew when you kind of first started out in acting or in industry in general? What is something kind of you wish you knew?
hmm.
Like that you know now that you're like, oh my gosh, this is something I wish I knew when I first started out in this whole thing.
I think oh not I think one thing I wish I knew was to not put so much pressure on myself,
Mm-hmm.
or just like on the piece or whatever I'm working on, because the moment it starts becoming more like a chore and less of something that you enjoy doing,
Mm-hmm.
for me anyways, that's a complete turn off.
Mhm.
Um, I I feel like when that happens, it's really hard for me to get back on track and try and find like the nuance in things.
Yeah.
Um, particularly with like film acting. But
100%. Like that's how I am. Because like when I first started out, like I thought like journalism, podcasting was like the easiest thing in the world. And I think many people in the industry think that too. Like, oh my God, this is literally the easiest thing
mm-hmm.
ever. Like this is like gonna be the best thing in the entire world, blah blah blah. And then it's not. Like that's something
Yeah.
I kind of wish I knew like when I kind of first started out is that like it's not easy. Nothing is easy in the industry, nothing.
Mm-mm. And it's always the best ones that make it look easy and they fool you. So
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's
yeah.
like the final question I have for you is what is some advice for actors or people that's starting out in the industry that are just kind of starting out and want to make it as an actor?
Aw. Um, my best advice. Ooh.
I
I
know this is a hard one a
I
little bit.
know there are so many different routes I could expand upon. I think to just like put yourself out there. It sounds so cheesy, but like truly there is only like one version of you. And
Mhm,
the whole like I don't fit into this archetype kind of character or that's not what's happening now. I feel like is so false because there truly is and should be a place for everyone to be represented on screen in some
mhm,
capacity. And like even though two people may look this similar or perhaps maybe even identical twins, I don't know.
mhm,
They're two separate people, and what you have and your experiences and your background, nobody else can have. So really taking ownership of that and bringing that as a sense of like life force to whatever you do, I think is really important.
100%. Like when like on-screen representation is so important and many people really don't see themselves on screen. And this is
Hmm.
something a problem. Like many people don't never see themselves and it's a problem for some people. They don't know what they want to be or they don't see themselves and it makes people like where are my people at, you know?
Exactly. No, I so agree. Or there are so many instances in which there's an opportunity for someone to be of that specific like ethnicity, religion, whatever, to be put in that position, and yet people continue to cast people who aren't that. Like Maisel, for instance, like, like
Mhm,
I'm Jewish and, like a lot of times, like unless it was like Fiddler on the Roof, there aren't
mhm.
really like, or falsettos, there are really not a lot of like Jewish plays. Well, except for Funny Girl, I guess. But even
Yeah.
now, like some of the people in Funny Girl like aren't necessarily Jewish and they're speaking Yiddish, which is like a very sacred like language and stuff. So
Mhm. Yeah, I just hope change comes soon. It's like we can't do this anymore, sis. That's
yeah,
all.
and I think that's also an important thing too, is to, like for yourself, like even if it does seem like a good opportunity, sometimes sometimes it's a test of timing. Like, if you don't subscribe to fully to the project or the idea or the way it's being done, like I understand like sometimes you can't be too picky, but at the same time you have to be able to stand behind what you're doing.
Mhm.
So even for like short films or anything of the sort, I think that like the best pieces of work are ones that you feel personally connected to and can fully stand behind.
100%. And so now I want to thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. It was so great speaking with you. Oh my gosh, it was so fun. And
Oh,
we
I'm
would
glad.
and we'll definitely keep in touch for sure next time. And yeah,
Yes.
we should definitely get together in New York City next time.
Yes,
I'm
next
down
time
in the
I'm
city.
here.
I would seriously that would be so fun. And I seriously love the city. And we'll definitely keep in touch. And yeah, let's keep in touch and everything.
Yes, of
All
course.
right, Grace, talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Bye.